Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're listening from. I want to begin with something simple but personal. Before I was teaching emotional mastery, I was living the consequences of not fully understanding that concept. So that means there were rooms that I walked into where I looked confident on the outside, but internally, my nervous system was negotiating my worth. There were times I stayed quiet when I should have spoken up, moments I overexplained when I should have trusted my voice, and moments I questioned whether I truly belonged in spaces I had worked very hard to enter. And what I eventually discovered changed not only my career, but the trajectory of my life. Success is not determined only by intelligence, talent, or preparation. It is profoundly shaped by what happens inside of you when pressure rises. My name is Dr. Lisa Drew. My doctorate is in educational leadership, and I have spent my career studying leadership, human behavior, and the emotional patterns that quietly influence how we show up in our biggest moments. As an educator, leadership consultant, speaker, and emotional mastery coach, I have worked with high performers across industries who all shared one surprising challenge. They were highly capable, but their nervous systems were untrained for visibility, pressure, and influence. And here's what I want you to understand today. Emotional mastery is not about becoming someone different. It is about becoming unavailable for the internal reactions that cause you to shrink in rooms where you were meant to lead. Because the truth is, many of the ceilings we experience are not external barriers. They are internal responses. Today, I want to show you how to change that. I want to help you to walk into any room, interviews, boardrooms, collaborations, conversations with the steadiness, clarity, and authority your expertise deserves. Not by eliminating fear, but by training your response to it. So let me ask you a question as we begin. What might change in your life if your nervous system stopped interpreting opportunity as danger? Walk into any room like you belong there. Let me start with a question. Have you ever walked into a room and instantly started negotiating against yourself? No one said anything yet. Nothing has gone wrong, but internally you were already shrinking. You adjusted your posture, you softened your opinion, you told yourself not to say too much, not to sound too confident, not to be too much. And in a matter of seconds, you went from prepared to protective, from powerful to careful, from qualified to quiet. Almost everyone watching this has lived some part of that moment. The interview where your voice didn't sound like your real voice, the meeting where you had the idea, but someone else presented it first. The collaboration where you agreed outwardly while disagreeing internally. The presentation you rehearsed only to rush through it because your heart was pounding. Let me normalize something for you right now. That is not a competence problem. That is a nervous system response. And unfortunately, no one has really taught us how to manage that. But today, we can change that. Here's a truth that most people discover too late. Your success is not determined only by your intelligence. It is not determined only by your work ethic. It is not even determined by your talent. Your success is deeply influenced by one question. What happens inside of you when the pressure rises? Because pressure is not rare. Pressure is the interview. Pressure is visibility. Pressure is leadership. Pressure is growth. And the important part, many high achievers miss. Pressure does not destroy performance. Unregulated emotion does. You could be the smartest person in the room and still lose the opportunity if your nervous system shifts into protection instead of presence. Years ago, I was invited into a room that intimidated me. Not because the people were unkind, but because they were accomplished. You know that type of room. The kind where everyone sounds confident. The kind where titles get longer and longer. The kind of room you suddenly become hyper aware of yourself. I remember sitting at the table, noticing something subtle but important. I was filtering my thoughts before I spoke them, not refining them, filtering them. And that is different. So filtering says, don't sound foolish, don't be challenged, don't stand out too much. And in that moment, I had a realization that shifted my career and my belief system. I was not being evaluated by others nearly as much as I was restricting myself. No one told me to shrink. My nervous system suggested it. Have you ever noticed that sometimes the greatest limitation in the room is internal? Not external, internal. That awareness changed how I approached every high stakes space that I entered afterwards. So let's talk about fear, honestly. Most people believe fear shows up as panic. But for high performers, fear is far more sophisticated. It looks like over preparing, over explaining, over apologizing, over functioning, people pleasing, playing small while calling it professionalism. Fear does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers in a responsible, polished way. And here's what your brain is trying to do in those moments. Protect your belonging. Protect your safety. Because thousands of years ago, being excluded from the group meant danger. So today, your brain treats social evaluation like survival. An interview can feel like a threat. Public speaking can feel like exposure. Disagreement can feel like rejection. And your body reacts before your logic has time to intervene. And most of the time, our body reacts subconsciously. We don't even realize it's happening. But your heart rate is increasing, your breathing is shortening, and your thoughts are scattering. Then afterwards, you think, what just happened? That wasn't even me. Exactly. It was your survival wiring, not your capability. So let me ask you something gently. How many opportunities have slipped past you? Not because you were unqualified, but because you didn't feel safe enough to show your full self. How many rooms did you exit, replaying everything you wished you had said? How many times have you agreed when you meant to advocate? How many times have you stayed invisible when you were meant to lead? There is a particular kind of regret reserved for moments when we abandon ourselves, not dramatically, quietly. And the danger is, if we don't understand why it happens, we start telling ourselves a damaging story. Maybe I'm just not confident. Let me correct that belief right now. Confidence is not something you wait to feel. Confidence is what naturally emerges when your nervous system learns that visibility is safe. One of the greatest myths in professional development is the idea that successful people are fearless. They are not. They simply learned not to obey fear automatically. Fearless is not the absence of activation. Fearless is the mastery of response. Your heart can race and you can still speak clearly. Your hands can feel cold and you can still lead the conversation. Your voice can tremble slightly and you can still influence the room. Emotional mastery is not about eliminating human reactions. It is about not surrendering your authority to them. I once coached a woman who kept coming in second place for roles that she was more than qualified for. After one interview, she told me, I don't understand. I know I'm capable, but when I sit down across from them, my brain starts sprinting. So we didn't start with her resume. We started with her breathing. We practiced slowing down before answering. We practiced allowing silence instead of rushing to fill it. We practiced grounding her feet so her body registers stability. At her next interview, something remarkable happened. She paused before responding to the first question, and the interviewer leaned in. Why? Because calm communicates authority. She got the offer, not because she became smarter in 2 weeks, because she became steadier. Never underestimate how persuasive regulated energy is. People trust the nervous system before they trust the words. Let's talk about collaboration for a moment, because this is a highly important topic in today's world. Because collaboration sounds beautiful in theory, but in practice, it often requires emotional maturity. Disagreement is not the problem in most workplaces. Reactivity is. I worked with a leadership team that could not get through meetings without tension escalating. Voices would sharpen, defensiveness would surface. Ideas died quickly because the environment didn't feel safe enough to explore them. We introduced one simple practice: pause before responding. 3 seconds. The pause interrupted emotional reflexes. And almost immediately, the tone of conversations changed. Disagreement became thoughtful instead of personal. Creativity expanded. Trust increased. Here is something that I want you to remember from this. The calmest person in the room often becomes the most influential. Not by force, but by nervous system leadership and co-regulation. Imagine walking into your next high stakes moment and feeling anchored instead of activated. Imagine speaking and hearing steadiness in your own voice. Imagine being challenged and staying thoughtful instead of defensive. Imagine no longer abandoning your ideas halfway through a sentence. That version of you is not hypothetical, it is trainable, and it is possible. Your nervous system is adaptable. It learns through repetition, which means every regulated response is literally reshaping your future capacity. Before your next important moment, try this. Slow your breathing intentionally. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Feel your feet. Pause before answering. Speak 10% slower than what feels natural. Do not rush brilliance. Let the room meet you at your pace. Because when you rush, your authority rushes out with you. Let me free you from something tonight. Belonging is not something that the room gives you. Belonging is something that your nervous system allows you to feel. It is something that you give yourself. When your body feels safe, you stop scanning for approval. You stop overperforming. You stop shape shifting. And you start showing up as your actual self, which, by the way, is more compelling than any performance. You don't need a louder personality. You do not need more perfection. You do not need to erase fear. You need emotional training to be able to transform your fear into fuel. Because the next level of your life will require visibility. It will require courageous conversations. It will require leadership presence. And you deserve to enter those spaces fully available, not partially guarded. The room doesn't get to decide if you belong. Your nervous system does. Train it and watch how your life expands. So here's my invitation to you. The next time you walk into a room, notice your body, regulate before you respond, pause before you speak, anchor before you lead. And if you're ready to go deeper, to truly understand how you show up under pressure in interviews, in leadership moments, in collaboration, I invite you to take the Emotional Mastery Assessment or connect with me. Let's train the internal response that determines external results, because one regulated moment can open a door that changes everything. Walk into that next room knowing that you belong there. As we come to a close tonight, I want to leave you with one final thought. Your life will place you in rooms that stretch you, rooms that ask more of you, rooms that reveal you, rooms that elevate you. Do not shrink to survive those moments. Train yourself to meet them. Because the goal is not to become fearless. The goal is to become steady. To regulate instead of react. To anchor instead of withdraw. To trust yourself instead of negotiate against yourself. Remember this, the room does not decide if you belong, your nervous system does. And the beautiful truth is, it can be trained. So the next time you feel your heart race before speaking, the next time the pressure rises in an interview, the next time tension enters a collaboration, pause, breathe, ground yourself, and remind your body, I am safe enough to be fully seen. Because one regulated moment can change how people experience you and how you experience yourself. Because how people experience you can change your opportunities. If tonight sparks something in you, if you are ready to expand your emotional capacity, strengthen your leadership presence, and remove internal barriers standing between you and your next level, I invite you to stay connected. Bring this work into your organizations, into your teams, into your leadership, into your life. Because emotional mastery is not just a professional advantage. It is a life advantage. Thank you for allowing me to share this space with you. And wherever your next room is. Walk into it knowing you belong there. Today is your day with Lisa Drew. I'll see you next time.